So, dear devotees, I'm very happy to introduce Mahatma Prabhu, today's speaker of this class. I'm really sorry I'm on the way, so I'm a little late. But Mahatma Prabhu is a very senior disciple of Srila Prabhupada. Originally, he was a musician and he was employing his talents in Krishna consciousness. He recorded beautiful music for Krishna, and he was distributing books for many, many years. And he's famous for giving very insightful and deep seminars on the topics, on the relevant topics like forgiveness and so many other topics. He's a very deep thinker. He's a spiritual master in our society, society. So he has a lot of spiritual experience, both his own spiritual experience and the experience of his disciples, which he is sharing with. And I am sure that his presentation on this very important topic, how to be, how to live in this world, but not to be of this world, and how to interact with the society, and how to be properly incorporated in the fabric of the society, but at the same time, not to lose one's spiritual identity. That's all very important. So we all eager to hear Mahatma Prabhu. In a few minutes, I will be back to the place where I can join and listen to him without too much extra noise. Otherwise, I'm happy to introduce him, and I'm eager to hear what he's about to say.
Thank you very much, Bhakti Goswami, and we would like to ask Achyutatma Prabhu as GBC for Russia to also say a few words to welcome Mahatma Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Mahatma Prabhu, please accept my most humble obeisances. We're just very happy to get your association, and we're waiting eagerly. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Okay, Mahatma Prabhu, it's over to you now. Thank you very much.
Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutadaya Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamini Tinamane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paschatya Dasatarini. So, Madan Mohan Prabhu, I want to get specific on exactly on what you want me to speak about and what the problem is we're trying to solve. Is it the problem of like being human and not being human at the same time? Like not giving up our humanity, being good people, but not so good that we become sentimental, influenced by our environment? Or is it more just as a general principle of how when we're interacting in the world, we can maintain our Krishna consciousness? Or is it basically the same idea?
Yes, Mahatma Prabhu, exactly that, and more. What this Bhagavad Sandarbha, as we discussed with you in Bhaktivedanta Maharaj, is about is we are trying to take advantage of Srila Prabhupada's direct disciples and spiritual leaders of our movement to win from them the kind of teachings that Srila Prabhupada imparted in them, both by his instructions and by his personal example. We have covered so far 9 different topics, ranging from Bhakti versus Varnashrama, Pancharatrika and Bhagavata Vidhi, the position of GBC, Raga Marga in ISKCON, and other such important topics. And the topic that you kindly consented to discuss with us, is the topic of the social role of ISKCON, how devotees of ISKCON are supposed to behave according to Srila Prabhupada toward this world and people inhabiting it, so we could set the right example without compromising our principles and the higher goal that we are supposed to lead the people to. Because sometimes we tend to err on one of these 2 sides. So since you've given so many seminars on that topic, and I was fortunate to attend some of them back in the day, We thought that you're one of the best speakers on this topic.
Well, I will speak what I can, and then you can guide me if you
Well,
want me
that's-
to take it in a different direction or an additional direction.
Yeah, we have devotees and senior devotees here with us. We have regional secretaries, temple presidents, and leaders of different projects, and they will ask relevant questions. Your class coincides with a course on Vaishnava ethics that is taught by Bhakti Bhagavatamrita Keshav Maharaj.
Okay.
So that was our approach, teaching a specific topic and then asking disciples of Prabhupada to deepen the topic by instructions steeped in Prabhupada's example and teachings, like that. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna. Panchakāpaturvyaśca kripasindhubhyev cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Mukam karoti vachalam pangulangayate girim kripa tamaham vande siguru dinatarinam. In the early days of ISKCON in America, and maybe this was true for you in Russia, we really had no concern about other people other than making them devotees. And if we could make them devotees, we weren't really concerned. Even sometimes it was to the degree that if we gave them Krishna consciousness and they didn't really take it up, we would just ignore them. They'd come to the temple and they'd been to the temple 3 Sunday feasts and they hadn't moved in the temple, we would ignore them, seriously. We had no concern, even for a congregation, only for full-time devotees, but what to speak of people outside. And a story you may have heard was one senior devotee was driving through a red light. And the devotee said, "You should stop at the red lights." And he said, "We do not care for Kamsa's laws." So we felt, we kind of, as Krishna's servants, more or less, we ran by our laws, and everything we did was valuable, and everything everyone else did was not. That extended to stealing flowers, but it even extended in other cases to stealing other things, because after all, it all belongs to Krishna. So why not take it? You know, I don't want to get into it. It wasn't like the devotees were thieves, but sometimes they would cheat a little bit here and there to get gas for free, or like take advantage of petrol, so forth. So I think the most interesting thing about those days was that, of course, Prabhupada did not teach us to do that. That was our interpretation of Isarvashamidam Sarvam, everything belongs to Krishna. So it's so interesting how Prabhupada's teachings can be interpreted according to an immature realization or immature understanding. So everything belongs to Krishna was interpreted that basically we can take what we want. And the other shloka, devotee has all good qualities, non-devotees have no good qualities. So it's like, what could we learn from them? What value is there in anything they say? Recently, I read something which was interesting. I don't know if you're aware of this. Of course, we understand Vaishnava aparad. Aparad means offense. Literally, it means to be separated from worship of Krishna. So we have this word Vaishnava aparad. We have the word Dham aparad, offenses to the Dham. Didi aparad, aparad in seva, we call it seva aparad in service to the deities. So we're familiar with this, but Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said there's another kind of aparad, which is called jana aparad. And jana aparad, jana means person, and aparad, of course, means offense. So it's offense to people in general, people who are not devotees. To mistreat them is considered an offense, which has not a devastating effect on one's bhakti, but it does have some effect. If I offend a devotee, it will have an effect on me. If I offend a non-devotee, it will also have a little effect on me. If I offend a very elevated devotee, it will have a huge negative effect on me. If I offend a very elevated, very elevated devotee, it'll probably destroy my bhakti. So according to who you offend, it has various degrees of effects. As Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said, but even offending an ordinary person, it has a detrimental effect on your consciousness. And Sanatana Goswami, he mentioned that because compassion is a quality of a Vaishnava, and because normally we see compassion in the context of giving Krishna consciousness and don't see it any other way, he said sometimes a devotee can lack ordinary compassion in ordinary affairs because he thinks, well, that's not the compassion I'm supposed to be giving. And so he gave an example. He said, perhaps there's a person who needs help, a poor person. And he said, you wouldn't give up your devotional service, you wouldn't stop your service to help him, but if you could help him, and is not influencing, it's not delaying or derailing or detouring your devotional service, you should. So let's say, you had 3 jackets on and it's cold and there's a homeless person. And he said, could I have a jacket? You have 3. You go, okay, here, take a jacket. Or you could think, no, he's not a devotee. Why should I serve him? So Sanatana Goswami said, no, you should if you can. And you may know the story that some of the devotees, grihastas, were doing parikrama with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, and they weren't giving charity. And he said, you should give charity. And they were thinking, well, we'd rather give to the temple. Or we don't know, are these devotees, what will they do with the money? He said, no, you should give because your heart will become hard if you don't give. Interesting. So Sanatana Goswami said the same thing, that compassion is a quality which all devotees should develop. And if we neglect showing ordinary compassion when we can, then it reduces the development of compassion, which is the same thing that Bhaktisiddhanta meant. When you do aparad to ordinary people, you're developing a tendency to commit aparad. Have you noticed that? If you have a tendency, the way you deal with people in general, it creates a tendency, and then that tendency will manifest in the Sangha. So if I'm offensive or critical of people in general, it will tend to flow over, because that's the consciousness I'm cultivating, flows over into bhakti. So I found that interesting, because sometimes, we want to help people, we see them suffering, but we're thinking, if I help them, it's not really Krishna consciousness. Should I do anything to help them? And so those are some instructions that might guide us that way. But I think specifically, aside from the benefit that the person we'd help would be getting, we're learning that it's beneficial, if not necessary for us, because it becomes a paradox in a sense. You have this saying in Russia. Someone told me you have this saying in Russia. Maybe it's an old saying, it's not common now, that you bow to your superior and you punch the nose of your junior. Is that a saying, or is there something like that? Anyone heard that?
Well, it definitely reflects some social interactions. I haven't heard it as a
Yeah.
saying. As a,
Anyway, yeah, so we
Hey.
understand. Yeah.
yeah.
Someone said that maybe it's an old saying, from another time in history. But we understand the idea. Very easy to honor superiors, isn't it? It's what we're meant to do. If we don't do it, it's offensive. If you don't pay obeisances to a sannyasi, you're supposed to fast, right? I always pay obeisances to sannyasis because I don't like to fast. Okay, so I'm very respectful, right? Younger people, I may not be so respectful. And so when we are taught these things, we always, be compassionate, don't be offensive. It's always easier when it's going up, right? And it's always harder when it's going down. And for devotees, and it's confusing when it goes outside devotional circles. But at least when I was with Prabhupada, and many people noticed this about Prabhupada, he was like always the same with everybody. And he was often very respectful to people who weren't Mayavadis or trying to fight with Prabhupada. But in general, he was quite respectful with people, especially people who had positions. And one time the devotee said, Prabhupada, the scientists, they're very proud. And he said, they have a right to be proud because they're learned, they're intelligent, they've studied, they've done their research. So we can respect that. We don't respect their views on God if they're atheists, but we respect them as learned people. So I think this first point, this general point, is extremely important. Prabhupada did not set an example of disrespect. Prabhupada did not tell us to do anything illegal, to lie, to steal. And we did it. We did all of that. And today a devotee told me a story that there were a Mayavadi group that somehow or other had come to Croom Court. Croom Court was a huge castle they had in London, which subsequently was sold. And they invited this group to come and, be with the devotees. And then this group would have classes, and the devotees, some of the learned devotees were encouraged to go to their classes and challenge them. And these were guests, and challenge them in the class. So it was quite an embarrassing situation, and you could imagine. So these were the kind of things that we were doing that Prabhupada was not encouraging us to do. Our Sankirtan came to a point where many devotees were disturbed with the techniques that were being used, especially not being truthful. A lot of devotees were just not truthful about where the donations were going, because they found that they would get bigger donations if they made up little stories, kind of stretched the truth. And so some devotees were disturbed. It came to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada said, I sold books, I never lied. I did it, I just talked about Krishna. If you talk about Krishna, you can exaggerate as much as you want. It won't be a lie. So here we have devotees interpreting the philosophy and doing things which Prabhupada didn't want us to do. It's quite interesting. Misunderstanding how to deal with people. So I think for me personally, when we talk about Trinada pi sunichena, I think that the challenge that often arises is, how do you respect people whose actions are not respectable? And I think this was, as young devotees, this is where we made a huge mistake. we're chanting Trinadapi Sunichena, but we're disrespecting people all the time because they're not devotees. So, so how do we engage? At least for me, when I study Prabhupada's books, that's one thing, intellectualizing it. But actually putting into practice Trinadapi Sunichena in every situation with everyone, even the persons whose habits are questionable or whose habits are sinful, whose knowledge is less, how to respect them, how to honor them. We were very bad at that. We were very condescending with people. And so what I saw with us as younger devotees is that we were very proud. As young devotees, we had not developed much humility. So by nature, we were proud. And then all the things that Prabhupada would say about non-devotees, we would use that knowledge to puff ourselves up that we're better. It's interesting, isn't it? Prabhupada's saying, these are karmis, these are jnanis, these are yogis, these are their faults. It was totally tattva, it was totally philosophical, so we would understand. But we took that, and what happened? We became proud, condescending. We would put people down. And then every morning we would chant Trinadapi Sunichena. In one ear, out the other. We had no idea what that meant. I don't know if you had that experience in the early days in Russia. I'm sure these things still go on for new devotees. It's quite common. So Prabhupada is giving us transcendental knowledge. The transcendental knowledge is making us think we're better than everybody. It's making us feel like we have a right to do things which we don't have a right to do. And we end up in this consciousness, which is diametrically opposed to the vision that Prabhupada's trying to create in us of respecting all living entities. It's very interesting. So our egos, our desire to become lords, controllers, become proud, was very, very strong. And then the knowledge Prabhupada was giving us was often inflating it instead of reducing it. So hopefully we've matured somewhat in some ways to be able to be more respectful. Okay, then we gave another interesting thing is we gave little or no value to people of other religious faiths. But if you notice, when Prabhupada talked to people of other religious faiths, he didn't really put them down. Basically, he talked about not eating cows and let's work together. That was his basic discussion most of the time. You should stop killing cows and we should work together to spread God consciousness. So, but we were very condescending. You know, we're better. We're the best. So that kept things that Prabhupada did and said. It was like often we didn't see what he was doing and we didn't see what he was saying. We were interpreting it to just put ourselves above everyone else. Even though he wasn't doing that, even though we were seeing he wasn't doing that. So I think one of the big problems and one of the big solutions for integrating is to develop more respect for people in general. And that can only happen by developing humility and cultivating Krishna consciousness. At least this is how I cultivate it. I meet so many people that I find to be intelligent, possessed of good qualities, cultured, knowledgeable, but unfortunately, they don't have the association of a pure devotee. And so therefore, they're lacking in many ways, at least in their siddhanta and their conclusions and their final understandings. And I, in many ways, feel inferior to a lot of people that I meet or I see on YouTube. And I feel fortunate that I've met Prabhupada, and I feel that fortune has put me in a position where I'm doing better than I ever possibly could have if I didn't meet Prabhupada. And therefore, by Prabhupada's mercy, I'm doing better than even these intelligent people who have not yet understood Krishna consciousness. But at the same time, I often feel myself in many ways much less qualified than them. And I think one of the mistakes that we made when we were younger was that the fact that we've connected to Prabhupada, that means we're better in every way, when in fact, a lot of times we're not acting in better ways. Sometimes we would act in worse ways than other people. Sometimes with less integrity, less honesty, less concern, less empathy. We've all seen this, right? And it's not that once you become a devotee, you become perfect. So we've seen sometimes devotees acting in ways where we wonder, you're a devotee, why are you acting like that? That's not the way devotees act. So we understand we're conditioned souls. We're challenged, we're struggling. I think maybe what can help us in relating to the world is the realization of our fortune, but that we're conditioned souls just like everyone else. And we've got a process that is helping us deal with our conditioning, purify it, overcome it. But Prabhupada said, until you become pure, you're basically impure. You're not really a devotee fully in the full sense of the word. And so there, it looks like there's a lot of difference between us and them, but there's not that much actually. Rabindranath Sarup, he once said, the demarcation line between devotee and demon is not ISKCON. This side, you're in ISKCON, you're a devotee. This side, you're not in ISKCON, you're a demon. He said, no, that's not the demarcation line. You might have some demons inside and some devotees outside. So I think that assumption really had created so many problems for us. And I might use the present tense also, because I'm sure it's creating problems in some places. I chant Hare Krishna, I'm a devotee, everything I do is good. There's a phenomena called cognitive dissonance. And we're going to have class tomorrow. I'm going to talk more about it tomorrow, but I think it's relevant. It's relevant to today. Cognitive dissonance means you see something, but you don't see it. Like you're acting in a certain way, but you don't notice it. You either, it's not justifying your action. I'm going to go become a terrorist and kill people in the name of God. It's not that. It's that you're doing something and you're not even aware you're doing it, because you believe that as a religious person, you are more or less perfect. So, like, you can do no wrong because you're a religious person. So it's something like this: devotee is good. I'm a devotee, therefore everything I do is good. Of course, we know that not everything we do 24/7 every day of the year is good. But because I think I'm good, then I think everything I do is good. Donald Trump had that problem. There was no place in his brain did not have a place for him doing anything wrong. So when people told him you did something wrong, there was no way he could understand that or admit it. It was not his self-conception of a perfect person. So a lot of times we have kind of like this spiritual narcissism where I'm a devotee, so everything I do is good. And then when we don't do something good, we don't even notice it. So let me give you an example. This will make it more clear. There was a girl who was more or less the poster child of the green movement. And so when she would shop, she would bring her own biodegradable bags. She would never use plastic. She would recycle. She was extremely careful about everything. And when people would drink out of plastic, like water bottles, she would just think, this is so bad. What's wrong with you? Why don't you understand? And when people weren't recycling, she would be very upset. So one day she looked in a refrigerator and she saw plastic bottles and plastic containers. And so those plastic bottles and containers were put by her in the refrigerator, and they were sitting there, and she didn't notice them. She didn't even remember that she did that. Isn't that interesting? And why didn't she remember? Because she was so identified with the green movement, so identified that she could not do anything which would be in any way detrimental for the environment, that when she did it long ago, whenever that was, she would open the refrigerator every day and see plastic, but not see it, because that went against her identity as someone who is preserving the earth. Isn't that interesting? So she was actually doing what she stood against, and she didn't notice it. And one day she finally noticed it. Like, who put the plastic in my refrigerator? You did. No, I couldn't have done that. Yeah, you did. So cognitive dissonance means you do something and you don't even realize you're doing it because your self-conception is of a person who wouldn't do that. So therefore, then you can come to this point of doing things which are not Krishna conscious and not even noticing it because you think I'm a devotee, so everything I do is Krishna conscious. Can you relate to that? Does that make sense to you? Have you ever gotten angry unjustly, unfairly at somebody? Thinking, I'm the leader, he deserves to be chastised? Yeah, if you're a leader, you've probably done it. I've done it. I'm entitled, I'm the leader, I can mistreat you. And then I sit down and I give a class next day about how we should be humble and leaders should be servants. Have you seen that before? Has that been done? It's done. It's common, not just in ISKCON, in religious movements in general. So I think this is something we need to be aware of. If you want to do an exercise right now, it's quite a fun exercise, although you'll be depressed when it's finished, but also enlightened. We could do it if you want. Actually, I was asking people to have a pen and paper, but you could do it in your head. But if you have a pen and paper, I think it's good we could do it. You said you had leaders here, because if you like the exercise, then the leaders can take this exercise. Should we do it, Maharajas? Is it appropriate? We do an exercise here.
Yes, please do it. Please do it.
Okay.
It's very good. It's
Okay.
more than appropriate.
Okay, so you have a piece of paper, if you have. I guess you could do it on your phone if you have to. So we divide it left and right. And I'll tell you what to put in the left column first. Put in the left column what you value, what your values are. Like you value cleanliness, or you value saving the earth, or living simple, those kinds of things. I value studying Bhagavatam. Write your values down. Maybe like 5 or 10. And if you don't have paper, you can think. What are your values? I value chanting japa. Things that you give priority to, things that are important in your life. Being kind to devotees, I value that. Eating healthy, I value that, like that. Being humble, things like that. And You probably shouldn't have to think too much about this because you know what you value. I value loving relationships. I value serving the Vaishnavas. You know, all these things. And even materially, what you value. Exercise. Hmm. There is part 2 to this. I'm just waiting for, I can see some of you are still writing, so I'm just waiting. Part 2 is going to test your cognitive dissonance, if you have any, and how much you have. Of course, for devotees, we value many of the same things. Okay. Okay, so let's do part 2. Okay. Imagine that your life was being videoed for the last 6 months. And we could see everything you were doing and everything, and we heard everything you're saying. I don't have the video, don't worry, I'm not going to show it, but I don't know if you'd want me to show it or not. You know, if we're doing good, you'll say, yeah, show the video. Or we'll say, don't show that video. And this video of your life goes into a video lab. And for 24 hours a day in 3 shifts, you have experts analyzing what you value by looking at your life and looking at what you say. So you can't tell them what you value. They have to determine what you value by looking at your life. So in the right column, I would like you to write down what you think they would say about what you value by watching your life. So let's say you say, studying Shastra is very important for me. And the first thing you do in the morning is you go on to Facebook and start chatting. So they're not going to write studying Shastra is important unless later in the day you're actually studying it and they see that. But if it's just an idea in your head that it's important, but they don't see it, they can't write it down because it doesn't show in your life. So in the right column, imagine what they might say that you believe, that you value, what's important to you, just by observing your life and listening to your conversations. And if you're you're doing very well in Krishna consciousness, the left and right columns will line up pretty much. And we've had some devotees where the left and right columns did not line up even on one thing. So it can go from either extreme to the other. And this is just for you. You don't have to post it anywhere. And we'll give you a few minutes to do that, and then we'll ask for some devotees to share their realizations. You all look pretty depressed right now. I said the exercise would be fun, but could be depressing for some, but inspiring for others, and revealing where we need to work. Okay. So I would like to ask you if you'd like to share. I'll share first. I'll share one cognitive dissonance with me, but maybe it's not so dissonant because I'm aware of it. And I think we all, to one degree, have this problem. I value trust because trust is the basis of relationships. I value that very much. It's very important to me. But sometimes I tell people I'm going to do something and I forget that I told them. You ever done that? Yeah, I'll give this back to you Monday and you don't. I'll pay you back Tuesday and you forget. We'll do this on Wednesday. You didn't write it down, you forget. So the people on the video are looking at me and thinking, he doesn't seem to value trust so much because he keeps forgetting. But on the left side, I write down, I'm very trustworthy. That's a cognitive dissonance. I'm not aware that I'm acting in a way which is breaking trust. But inside, I think I'm trustworthy because I believe trust is important. So that's an example. So would someone else like to share? I guess if they share in Russian, then Madan Mohan, you can translate it for
Yes,
me.
I will translate.
Yeah. So who would like to be brave enough? And some of you may have gotten your left columns and right columns perfectly aligned. And
Would that by itself be a sign of cognitive dissonance?
or pride? It could be, but if somebody is really introspective and has done this kind of work, it's possible they could have, or they could just be very advanced devotees. Yeah. So it seems to be less common from the, I've done this test maybe 50 times. It's more common to be out of alignment than totally in alignment, but some devotees are. Okay, who wants to share? Who doesn't want to share? Who would share? I'll put it that way. Okay.
Mataji Rukmini Priya has raised her hand.
Okay,
and she is a senior Vaishnavi, a leader and the Shiksha Guru for many devotees in southern Russia.
Fantastic.
Харе Кришна, примите, пожалуйста, мои поклоны, дорогие вайшнавы, мои поклоны, Махарадж. Ну, это очень полезное упражнение. Я себе ставлю 3. Вот все, что вы сказали, оно верно. Что-то у меня совпадает, но что-то, над чем я работаю. Вот, над чем работаю, то есть это определенная динамика, и еще раз ты видишь свое реальное состояние, и это очень полезно. Я думаю, что можно регулярно это делать.
Не нужно будет переводить, Матаджи, нужно по кусочкам переводить.
Пожалуйста, да.
Прабху, чтобы он тоже понимал. Кроме того, у нас преданные есть, которые слушают из других стран.
Да, простите.
So Mataji Rukmini Priya is a senior Vaishnavi from southern Russia. She is a leader and Shiksha Guru for many devotees. And she says that it's very healthy, very useful exercise, because when you take a closer look at yourself, then you understand how we fall short on many counts. And she would grade herself at, to use an American system of grading, at C, I guess.
Oh.
You have A, B, C, D, E, F, or something
Some
like that.
good, some alignment, and like
Yeah,
50% alignment,
Yeah, about
50%.
50% alignment and disalignment.
No.
Да, Матаджи.
Да, конечно, ну, как бы хочется на 5, если по шкале до 5. Вот, но я работаю над этим.
Of course, she would have liked.
Спасибо большое, очень полезное упражнение.
She would have liked to be able to grade herself as A, but at least she knows where she's lacking and she can work on it.
Yeah.
It's a very good exercise. Thank you very much for that.
Rukmini Priya, that's your name?
Yes, Rukmini Priya.
Rukmini Priya, I want to thank you because you're a leader and you've showed your leadership by being vulnerable, by being able to admit your faults. And that's a real leader. Sometimes leaders don't want to be vulnerable because they feel if they are, people will lose faith in them. But it's actually the other way around. By being vulnerable, they'll have more faith in you, and you teach them to be vulnerable by your example. So thank you. That was very good.
We have ladies among the most courageous today. Her next is Mataji Radha Baba. She's a senior leader from Georgia.
Okay.
A devotee of, you could say, of a lot of experience,
Hare Krishna.
courage, and determination.
Харе Кришна. Примите, пожалуйста, все мои поклоны и Махарадж мои поклоны. Я просто хочу воспользоваться и поблагодарить Махараджа за эту тему, которую он рассказывает. Это удивительно просто. Каждое слово просто в точку.
She would like to thank you very much, first of all, for the topic that you have covered today, because it's wonderful how every single word you say hits the target. Hits the nail on the head.
И вот этот момент, это упражнение, оно просто дает остановиться и посмотреть, действительно заглянуть внутрь, остановиться.
And the exercise that you have just administered to us gives us a chance to pause and look at, take a closer look at ourselves. Looks like your internet connection has let you down. I'm inviting other devotees because Mataji Baba's internet connection has gone down, and we're inviting other devotees to share. Ishana Prabhu is a senior leader from southern part of Russia. He's a temple president of our Sochi temple. Ishana Prabhu.
Харе Кришна, Махатма Прабху. Примите мои поклоны, преданные всем. Я хотел бы поделиться тоже своей работой. Спасибо в целом за тему. Для меня лично очень-очень актуально. Надеюсь, и для многих преданных тоже лидеров.
Thank you very much for this very relevant topic, relevant for me personally and also for many leaders, I guess.
Для меня лично очень важно такое качество, от природы, спасибо родителям так воспитали, это качество честности или правдивости, которое, я считаю, в наше время оно очень важно с учетом Кали-юги и последнего столпа религии.
And the quality I value the most, thanks to my parents who brought me up in this way, is honesty or truthfulness, because this is the last pillar of religiosity in our age.
И я написал в левой колонке это качество, и анализируя в правой, конечно же, увидел много таких моментов, когда сам далеко не всегда бывает до конца правдивым, до конца честным.
And I have put that down in my left column, but then analyzing how this quality applies to my life, I could understand how I'm lacking in that regard in some ways, not always being truthful.
И при этом очень часто сталкиваюсь с такой проблемой. На самом деле вот этот анализ я все время провожу как-то естественным образом внутри себя. Надеюсь, что лидеры вообще должны это делать и делают.
And I hope that our leaders are used to self-introspection self-inspection and introspection, because it's a very important and healthy exercise to take a closer look at oneself.
И в итоге на данный момент, видя вот в себе, прежде всего, да, отклонение от этого важного качества и в тех преданных, тех людях, которые меня окружают, вот, честно делюсь, что часто бывает, пропадает вообще желание или как право, вдохновение, в принципе, проповедовать, идти к людям, когда ты видишь, что у нас у самих, ну, действительно очень много недостатков, и мы, в принципе, не вправе говорить о каком-то идеале и куда-то людей звать. Вот что с этим делать? Вот реально пропадает вдохновение, пропадает энтузиазм, понимание, что мы имеем на это право.
I'd like to confess that when I see myself or other devotees, other leaders deviating from this principle, that undermines my enthusiasm to preach, because I realize that unless we measure up to the expectations of the preaching that we do, or the expectations or self-professed principle that we follow and value, if we deviate from them, that it deprives us of the right to tell other people what they should be.
Вот мог бы Махатма Прабху что-то сказать по этому поводу? Наверняка ему это тоже очень близко и знакомо.
Maybe you might be familiar with this feeling, and maybe you could comment on what I just said.
Yeah, well, you made two excellent points. That a leader needs to be introspective. And what I was talking about earlier was this nature we had, especially as young devotees, to put non-devotees, to criticize non-devotees. Oh, they're just karmis, they're fools, they're rascals, they're demons. Which, from a perspective of tattva, it may be true, but I'm talking about rasa. What it's doing in terms of relationship is it's causing us to not be introspective, because we can look out and criticize other people. And that usually means we're not looking in and evaluating ourselves. That's one of the reasons we do that, isn't it? If we're always condemning others, it's probably because we don't want to look at ourselves. So I appreciated your point that leaders need to be introspective. And what was the second point you made? I just forgot that.
The second point was that if we see ourselves deviating or lacking the quality we value in others, then we lose our enthusiasm for preaching, because we don't really have the integrity necessary for preaching.
Shastra says we have to be acharya and also teacher. But from my experience, being acharya is the main teaching, is the main way we teach. So you rightly said, if we speak something but we don't live it, it doesn't carry power. And it also makes us feel very guilty that we're saying something that we ourselves are not doing. It makes us feel like hypocrites. So we lose enthusiasm. In my experience, in traveling to different countries and trying to help devotees, it became clear to me that the most important way I could help devotees, teach devotees, was by example, much more than what I say. And that's why I said, when Rukmini was being vulnerable, I said, this is such a good quality for a leader, because she just taught vulnerability. You also taught vulnerability. And because you both were vulnerable, you've made it now easy for all these other devotees to be vulnerable. And you've set an example that that's what Krishna consciousness means. Vulnerability means humility. It means self-awareness. So I really appreciate that. And I agree with you that as leaders, that's one of the number one qualities. I have a story for you. This is such a funny story. In 1970, we got a message that Prabhupada said you should only eat 1 cup of dal and 2 chapatis a day. So we had a small breakfast, some fruit, some chickpeas, some yogurt. And then we had our lunch. 1 cup means 250 milliliters and 2 chapatis. That was it. That was our lunch. And there was no dinner. So could you imagine? You'd be a little hungry, right? But we got the letter from Prabhupada, and that's what Prabhupada said. So about 10 days later, we got the second half of the letter. We got the first sentence, but we didn't get the second half. And the second half was, but if you could eat 10, if you could digest 10 chapatis, then take 10. So the first half was supposed to say, if you can only digest a cup of dal and 2 chapatis, take it. But if you can digest 10 chapatis, eat that. But we didn't get the second half. So the whole temple was living off a small breakfast and 1 cup of dal and 2 chapatis. That was the only meal. We were starving. And I was a temple president. So I had to pretend that I wasn't starving because no one else would be able to follow this if I gave in, right? And so every day on Harinam Sankirtan, we would distribute prasadam. And everybody said, can I distribute prasadam? And they'd walk away from the Harinam party distributing, then they'd go around a corner where no one could see them, and then they would eat it because they were starving. And so I saw devotees doing this. And I thought, this is crazy. So one day, I got all the devotees together and I said, I'm starving. Are you starving also? They all said, yes. And I said, I can't do this. Can you do this? They said, no, we can't. And everyone was relieved and we just went back to normal prasadam. But if I was unwilling to admit my own fault, we would have starved until we got that next letter, like 2 or 3 weeks later. So if as leaders, we are not willing to share our struggles and how we deal with them, that nobody's going to share their struggle. But worse, devotees will think, well, I must be the only one struggling because nobody talks about their struggles. But when we share them, then everyone realizes, oh, I'm not the only one. Because you know what it feels like to think you're the only one with a problem. You feel like giving up. So thank you for sharing that. It's very, very important.
We have one more hand up from Pavana Prabhu, another leader from Russia. Pavana Prabhu, пожалуйста.
Харе Кришна, вайшнавы, мои поклоны всем. Естественно, я увидел какие-то вещи, которые не сходятся, но у меня какая-то странная вещь получилась. Может, меня спасать надо срочно. Сейчас я ее озвучу. Я, в принципе, увидел, что я себя не оцениваю из категории, что я делаю правильно, неправильно. Я смотрю только на мотивацию. То есть, если моя мотивация чистая, что я имею в виду под этим, что вот есть идеал, и я стараюсь делать все, что я могу в соответствии с этим идеалом, то я считаю, что со мной все нормально, и именно этому я стремлюсь учить других людей. Вот если прокомментируете как-то, спасибо.
Pavana Prabhu's question is that he doesn't evaluate, or doesn't assess what he does or doesn't do right. He assesses his ideals that he strives for. And if he does everything he can to strive towards the ideal that he assesses and make sure that the ideal is right, then he feels that he's eligible, if you will, or at least has the qualification to preach the same ideal to others. Is that something you could comment on?
Well, I think both are necessary. Assess the ideal and assess your progress towards the ideal. Honestly. I have another story for you. Because I think a lot of us think that as leaders, being honest will cause people to lose respect. This is a very interesting story. And I hope it addresses your question. I had a godbrother who had a huge problem for many years. And towards the end of his life, he wanted to let the devotee world know that he had this problem. It was a very bad problem, not a problem that a leader should have. He was a sannyasi and a guru. And so he was challenged with the problem. And he had cancer. He didn't know if he was going to live or not. And he said, I don't want to die with this lie in me. So he came out and told the public, I have this problem. I've been doing this for 20 years or 30 years. Something that no leader should do, no sannyasi should do. And I was wondering, I was very close with him, and I was wondering what was going to be the response from the devotee community now and from his disciples and so on. And I thought, well, the first place to go will be the Ritvik site, because they're the first to criticize. Somehow they're the first to find out. I think they live on the internet or something. I don't think they do anything else, some of them. And indeed, they got wind of it. And they're very fond of talking about fallen gurus. So whenever a guru falls down, they report, yet, and they use these words, yet another one has fallen. And so they reported that, but they said something interesting. After they reported that he's fallen, they said, but at least he was honest. So even the Ritviks appreciated a devotee who was a guru who was fallen because he was honest. Isn't that interesting? They appreciated his honesty. And many, many devotees, because I was involved, said, I can't imagine the humility it took for him to open up to the public and say that. And so rather than people losing faith in him, they actually gained faith in him because they saw this as an act of intense vulnerability and humility, and they respected it. So I just wanted to share that with the leaders. Of course, with discretion, how you present it, but in general, it was appreciated. The honesty was appreciated. And this is my ideal. This is where I'm at. And these are my obstacles. We're doing right now, we're doing a course in sexual purity. And so I've made, I don't know, 20 or 30 videos. So they watch 3 videos a week. And then on one day a week, we discuss. We break out into groups and we discuss what's in the video and the exercises. And everyone who's in the group is saying, this is so valuable because we can talk about our problem, because talking about it is therapeutic and often necessary to heal. So we don't want to create an environment within our movement where we make it taboo to talk about our problems, because if you don't talk about your problems, they remain within and you can't heal. So I think that culture is very important, that we create a safe environment where people can talk about their problems. And I've done many, many seminars over the years. And one time we were doing a japa retreat, and one of the leaders said, this was maybe like 10 years ago. So let's say he was a devotee for 40 years. And he said, we were talking about the problems we have individually with our japa, the mistakes we make, the offenses we make, what we're doing wrong. And in the discussion, he said, this is the first time in my life as a devotee I ever talked about my japa. And he was like, this is so stupid that we've never done this, that we need to talk about our problems. And what was so beautiful about it was that we had devotees from new to old, to gurus, to sannyasis, and everybody was on the same level talking about their problems. And you know what some of the comments were? Some of the comments were in this retreat, this is the best experience I ever had in ISKCON, because we were all one, working together, talking, discussing our problems to come in order to come to this ideal of Shuddha Nam. It was amazing. There was no hierarchy anymore. It's like we were all just practitioners, all facing more or less similar obstacles. It was an amazing, amazing culture that we created. So I just wanted to share that with you, that some devotees said this was the best experience they ever had in ISKCON, because it was just devotees struggling to chant Shuddha Nam. And it didn't matter if you were a sannyasi or a new bhakta or guru, man, woman, child, we're all in the same boat, struggling for the same thing, and all talking about our struggles. And it was just an incredible environment.
Mahatma Prabhu, thank you very much for this answer. That ties up with a question we have in the chat. There's one devotee, Trigunatita Prabhu, another leader in Russia, asks on the same topic. He says that it's become a fashion now, very popular among Vaishnava bloggers, to come out publicly admitting their weaknesses, saying that I'm such and such and I'm so and so, and I am who I am with all my weaknesses and shortcomings. Please accept me as I am. I'm very honest because I have the guts to admit my faults publicly. So that public lashing at oneself has become a fashion. And the question he has is in some quarters, and he says, should we publicly admit our weaknesses, or should everyone know them, or should we just admit and confess our weaknesses to our seniors who are in a position not just to appreciate us for being honest, but who can get down heavy on us and make us relinquish those weaknesses or rectify them?
Generally, that kind of sharing is done in confidence, because if it's made public, people may misunderstand and lose faith. And you may be exhibiting extreme levels of humility. It may not be a huge problem, but you need to discuss with someone. And I had a disciple who turned against me, and one of the evidences she used against me was a Vyas Puja offering, where I was telling Prabhupada how you show me one thing, but I do the other. And I went down a whole list of things that you show me that I do the other. Obviously, I don't do it every day, all day. And obviously, I'm trying to exhibit humility. And she said, just look, you're not qualified to be a guru. Look at this offering. So, people can misunderstand. So generally, it's done in confidence. And so let's say you have an istagosi and you want to discuss, the first requirement is this has to remain confidential. And then you have to define confidential, and confidential means nobody hears it, not your wife, not your best friend, not your mother. Because confidential for many devotees means, well, I won't tell anybody except my best friend. And your best friend thinks, and I won't tell anybody except my best friend. And that friend thinks, I won't tell anybody. And so within a matter of like one day, everybody knows. And it was supposed to be confidential. So that's really bad. Really, really bad. So, this guru who shared publicly, I was there with him and with other devotees, and we said, I don't think you should do that. I think we should discuss who you share it with and how you share it. And we left that evening and we got there the next morning, and he said, I shared it with the world. Somehow or other, it had a more positive effect than we expected, but I would be careful. And of course, the worst thing we could do is if somebody honestly and vulnerably shares something and then we attack them for it. Of course, if they share, I just killed somebody, you have to do something. But if they didn't do anything illegal and then we attack them, that's hitting below the belt. So I have seen devotees have very bad experiences by sharing with the wrong person, because the person who they shared with in confidentiality shared with someone else, and it created problems. So we have to keep confidence when we share. And if you want to share, sometimes maybe only with one person. But the other point I was making is that I think it's, if we portray ourselves as infallible and perfect, it's not of the right message, because it makes everyone else feel like something's wrong with them. I have another funny story. You're going to love this story. So I was at a workshop. It was not my workshop. And as part of the workshop, I forget exactly what we were doing, but we were revealing something personal. Everybody was opening up. That was the nature of the workshop. We'll open up and reveal something personal. So there was a second generation there who had a very bad upbringing. His father was actually, became an alcoholic. And he spent a lot of his life living in hotel rooms, traveling. His father had no residence. It was horrible. And he also suffers from some mental problems. So he was one of the last to speak in this session. And everyone was going around revealing their problems, their challenges, their emotional issues. And then it came his turn to speak, and he was laughing, and he couldn't stop laughing. And he finally stopped laughing. We said, "What's so funny? People are sharing all the horrors of their life." And he said, "You know what's so funny?" He said, "I thought I was worse than all of you, but now, you know, I had this horrible background, horrible upbringing. I thought I was worse than all of you. But now by hearing you, I realize you're all more messed up than I am." And he was just laughing. That was like the best thing he could hear in his whole life, that he was not uniquely troubled, but we who had normal upbringings were also equally, if not more, troubled. That's just the nature of the material world. So I've seen many, many times how helpful it is for devotees to know that their problems are not unique to them. And so, but the answer to your question is the right place, the right time, the right environment, confidential. We should be. And if that devotee chooses to reveal to the world, that's, of course, his choice.
Thank you very much, Mahatma Prabhu. Devakinandana Prabhu, who is a Bhakti Shastri, Bhakti Bhava teacher, he has a question. He has his hand up. Devakinandana Prabhu.
Okay.
You can speak in English, Devakinandana Prabhu. It will be easier. Everyone.
Хари Кришна. Примите. На английском задать мне?
Да, на английском можете сразу.
Hare Krishna, please accept my humble obeisances. You mentioned about when we spoke about our difficulties, and we can share it with our juniors. And you mentioned situation when there were some retreat and there were some juniors, sannyasis, gurus with retreat. And they all together shared some difficulties in Java. And we were educated in such way that we shouldn't share our difficulties with our juniors. But sometimes I see, and we can see that our senior devotees, gurus, they also have some difficulties, but they strictly follow this rule. They don't share it with us. Yes, what is the, can you share a little bit more about this principle?
Yes, that's a good question. And I knew the question would come up. If we look at the example of our acharyas, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, especially in his songs, he's describing his personal challenges as his own struggles, his own humility. Prabhupada sometimes did that also. But it's a little different than what they're sharing than what you would share privately, let's say with a peer or a senior. Like what some of you shared who are leaders with this exercise, it's more general, right? And it's not specific. It's general enough that I think devotees who hear it would honor you for being vulnerable that way. But with specific challenges, yes, it's true. You could share things which would cause juniors to lose faith, would be inappropriate for them to hear, because they'll think, well, he's been a devotee for 30 years and he still has this problem. I think I should quit now. You know, so it could have that effect. So what you say is true. But the other side is also true, that if we come across like infallible, that's not really our culture. Prabhupada, you know, we understood who Prabhupada was, but he never came across like that. He in many ways, if you analyze his actions and what he said, he definitely was not coming across to make us believe that he was something he wasn't. He often came across like an ordinary human being who has a material body that has to be disciplined. So, you know, it's a good question because there's a fine line between what will help the audience and what won't. We had, you know, I do a forgiveness workshop, and as part of the workshop, I reveal my own challenge with forgiveness and how I resolved it, what it was and how it was resolved. And in the workshop, we're asking everyone to do the same thing. And one of the most common comments I get from my students is, because you opened up about yourself, we were able to open up about our issue. And I know that as a teacher. So oftentimes I'm very vulnerable as a teacher, and it always has a positive effect within the context of the subject I'm teaching. Because it's like, oh, he had that problem? Oh, okay, well, if he's willing to reveal it, I can reveal my problem. So I've never had any negative from doing that, only positive. So I think in answer to your question, it's a question of time and place. What to reveal to who, what will the effect be? What is the effect that you want? And so when I'm revealing a weakness in public, it's more to let people know that I had this weakness, or I still have it, and this is how I dealt with it, rather than to reveal it to them to solve it, as I would to a senior devotee or to a god brother. Does that answer your question?
Девайкананда Прабhu отвечает на ваш вопрос?
Yes, thank you very much. I
You
have
had another
one
question,
more question, if possible. If not,
It's up to Madan Mohan.
No,
Madam
please go,
Mahaprabhu.
please go ahead. Yes.
Okay, you also mentioned about the situation when devotee can reopen his heart and say some truth about himself. How it should be, how it should be done in the right way. For example, it is, as far as I understand, that it's not very when I like tell about myself that okay, I can eat chocolate or look movies, something like this.
No, it has to.
It's my weakness.
Yeah, yeah.
I open for this, yes, but it will be not so.
Yeah. Well, number one, you're going to talk about with a person who is not going to judge you and condemn you. That has to be, and is going to keep it confidential. Because that way, by talking, often by speaking about it, you'll think it out in your head and you'll resolve the problem just by the person listening, right? So the purpose of you speaking about the problem is for you personally to deal with it, right? Whereas in public, if you speak about it, it's just to show people that I have this problem, or I had this problem. And we all have problems, and then the public feels like, oh yes, he's being very real. He's not being artificial, pretentious. He's being real about his challenges, and they appreciate it, provided the challenges you share are not something which would be upsetting to anybody. But when you're doing this confidentially, you're talking about it to a person who knows that you're talking about it to heal it. So you can say anything and the person understands we're just talking about it so we can work through it. And that's the only reason we're talking about it. I need to tell somebody, I need to talk about this. I want to overcome this problem. And sometimes just by having somebody listen, you will talk your way out of the problem yourself. Krishna will give you intelligence. So that's the idea. And sometimes if you don't have someone to talk about it, you may never be able to work through that problem on your own. Because often solutions come just from speaking about it. You won't need anything else. There's a lady who was highly placed coach. She's written many books. She's done many coaching methods. And she says, by far the most powerful method is to listen to someone talk and let them work out their problems by you listening to them. And the only thing you say is to them is, do you have anything else you want to say? That's all. No advice, nothing. It's a coaching method. And she said that what she observes by doing that is people come to their own conclusions. They figure out the problem themselves. And so you can do that as leaders also. When someone comes with a problem, say, tell me about it. Can you explain it? Tell me more. How does this make you feel? And often they'll come to the solution themselves. So we all need that. We all need someone we can talk to. We're now in our movement, we're talking a lot about leadership. And whenever you talk about leadership, you always talk about this idea that it's lonely on top because you're supposed to be better than everybody, right? And so when you get on top, you need people to talk to. Maybe it's other leaders who are facing similar challenges, but we can't be lonely and be successful. We need people to talk to. Some people are married, they have husbands and wives to talk to. Sometimes talking to husbands and wives is not enough. They need someone else. Did that answer your question?
Да, спасибо большое.
We have
Mahatma Prabhu, have another question from the chat by this.We Prabhu. He says, asks about how to properly correct other leaders by being honest and at the same time not wishing the leader ill or not trying to criticize him. How should we do it with respect and love without any drop of envy? Will there be a positive result? Will the positive result of such correction an indication that we've done everything right? Or if the result is negative, then our motive was necessarily impure?
No, not necessarily. Your motive is not necessarily impure if the result is not good. It could be the leader doesn't want any advice. So, you know the saying, give a fool good advice, they'll get angry, but give a smart person good advice, they'll also get angry if they don't want it. Like, who are you to tell me? So, what I try to do in the organizations that I work with and develop is create a culture where we kind of built into the culture is we want to get feedback from one another, and we always give it with the best intention, and we always take it with the best intention. So if you create that culture, then it's very easy. You know, in other words, we're always trying to be better as leaders. We have our ideals as leaders. We have a culture we're trying to create. And as leaders, we are the exemplars of that culture. And so what I do in my organization is we have a culture, and built into the culture is that if anybody doesn't follow the culture, anybody can approach that person and say, you know, our culture is this, you're not following it. And everyone's agreed to receive that feedback because they agreed to follow the culture. So that makes it easy to do because we've already agreed upon it. So that would be my first suggestion. You know, you've defined the culture, at least the culture as a leader, that we all agree to follow. And then we all agree that we can talk to one another when we see we're not following. And we all agree that we will talk with a mood only to help. That's our only motivation, is to help. There's no competition, no envy, no greed. So like you said, if there's no envy, if there's respect, then, and their motive is pure, then you're in the perfect position to give feedback, as long as you have a culture in which people want to receive it. Because if they don't, that's a problem, not just for you, but a problem for the culture, because then it means leaders can kind of do what they want and nobody can correct them. And you don't want that situation, right? Because as leaders, we're always learning and we make mistakes. And so, you know, a leader should want to learn, should want to be given feedback when he makes a mistake. And sometimes the other thing is, sometimes a leader doesn't make a mistake, but what he does, it upsets people. And it's not his mistake, but it's the nature of the people that what he did was difficult for them. So sometimes they need to tell them, you know, I know it's not your fault, but when you do this, it doesn't inspire me and actually discourages me. I just wanted you to know that. But you didn't do anything wrong, because I see it it encourages other devotees, but some of us become discouraged by it. It might just be encouraging book distribution. And say, well, when you encourage book distribution, we all feel like our services are worthless. And he said, yeah, but I never said that. And they say, I know you didn't say that, but we just want you to know that's how we feel, so you can be aware of it. So, you know, as a leader, you want that kind of feedback, because without it, you can go for years doing things that upset devotees and you don't even know it. So at least that's, I don't know if that's a practical answer, but if you don't have that culture, it's very difficult to give feedback. Yeah. Unless you're friends with that person or the person to ask you for the feedback.
Okay, thank you very much. Bhakti Vigyan Maharaj just wrote to me privately asking if you're going to continue questions and answers, because he has a question. But if you would like to continue your class and you have some more something else to share with the devotees before you ask for more questions.
No, I'll just keep taking questions and then.
All right, so Bhakti Vigyan Maharaj then has a question for you.
You started your class by saying that we should develop respect towards the people in general. And I have no doubt about it. And you gave a very solid example of Srila Prabhupada. So my question in this regard, why do then our scriptures, sometimes, you know, when we study our scriptures, it seems like they're lacking on these general points of good behavior, not stressing it enough, or giving the excuses to those people or to those devotees who want to have excuses, like the statement which you quoted, Harava Bhaktasya Kuto Mahat Gunan, Manorathena Sati Davato Bahi, from the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, how good qualities can be at all with non-devotees. So it seems like there is, even almost purposeful, line of our preaching to make us as aspiring devotees proud and to develop the condescending attitude towards others. So why is it? What's your opinion about this? How we should relate to these statements from our scriptures, which is an absolute, and something like this.
This opens up. It's such an interesting question because it opens up a topic of misuse of Shastra, misunderstanding, misuse, misapplication. When Prabhupada first started initiating devotees, and then devotees were not following their vows, from what I could understand, he didn't expect that. He expected that once you make a vow, that's it. Because that's the culture he came from. And I used to tell devotees, I would say, I'm not sure Prabhupada really understood how fallen we were, because I think a lot of things surprised him in our behavior. And then I believe he got used to it. He started to accept. He seemed to be very hurt in the beginning when devotees left, almost confused that someone would make those vows and then leave. And later he began to understand that we don't even take our vows seriously. And then he joked, we're like monkeys, Vanaras, right? You're my monkey soldiers. So I feel, although Prabhupada never said this directly that I'm aware of, but I feel like all those statements that you made and other statements that are misunderstood would not be misunderstood by cultured people. They would already, in other words, you don't have to tell them these things. They already have those qualities. So when they read Harava Bhaktasya Kuto Maha, if you have no bhakti, what good qualities you have, they understand it differently within a cultural context that, I'm serving Krishna, that has value. And they're not serving Krishna, so they'll have to take another birth. But not that they're not honest people or nice or kind or learned or compassionate. They wouldn't think like that because they would understand, well, that's what that verse means. And my point was, for us, whose egos were quite inflated, anything that could inflate them more just triggered it. Verses triggered our ego. They're not supposed to trigger it, right? They're supposed to deflate it. So, and we've seen, the misuse of Shastra. You know that story where Shudra was reading Shastra and Ramchandra killed him? Do you know that story? So this is he was reading the Vedas and he killed him. He said, this is dangerous that you have the Vedas.
Shudra was doing austerities. He was hanging down from the branches of the tree or something like this, and Ramachandra killed him there.
Yeah.
Not studying Shastras.
Yeah, the version I read is he was reading Shastra, but sometimes I feel like reading Shastra without expert guidance can be dangerous because it can produce fanaticism. It can produce black and white thinking. I hate to say this, but our Shastra, misunderstood, has been the cause of breaking up lots of marriages. And it's been the cause of other immoral acts because they're misunderstood.
But our Shastras are black and white. They do depict a very black and white picture.
I was, but I think what I've noticed is if you're if you're a balanced person and you understand black and white and synthesize it, you'll always come out with a balanced understanding, not one-sided, not fanatical. And it can be that some people are more by nature, their personality is more balanced, some are more black and white. So that's part of it. It's personality. I think it's culture. And I think it's the depth of Shastra understanding and the big thing of context. I mean, look at the society the Shastra came from, and everyone's talking about Varnashram. I was listening to one devotee advocating Varnashram. He's a big proponent of Varnashram. And he started a Varnashram. He said, well, it's all based on education because you have to train people from the beginning. Then they can enter a Varnashram society because they have the culture, which makes total sense. And has to start there. And the interviewer said, so you have a Gurukula there and it's in India? And he said, yes. And he said, well, how many students do you have? The interviewer was like really excited. Wow, this sounds exciting. You're starting Gurukula, establishing Varnashram. And he said, I have 2 students. But in India, all he could get was 2 students. So I think that's where we also run into problems. Like, okay, this is the culture. This is what you have to build, but you don't have the ingredients to build it. So you have to build it with different ingredients and you have to make some adjustments, which of course Prabhupada did over and over again. I think another thing which is extremely important is sometimes we read something, we get an idea what it means, but then we read a biography of Prabhupada and see how he applied it. And we think, oh, I didn't understand that because Prabhupada's applying this much differently in this situation. So I think all of those things are important considerations, especially if you're a leader. To not be balanced can be very dangerous because you'll lose people, because most people are in the middle. And if you're too far out on either side in your understanding, you won't relate to most people. And obviously, there's a question we can ask. If I understand something some way, like Grihastha life is horrible and kids are just like, the wife's like a tiger and the kids are like jackals, and say, now, do you actually believe that and feel that in your heart? And that's how you see the world? Because if you do, that's a problem. You're not going to be able to function normally. But as a theoretical framework, as a tattva, you can say, okay, I want to be brahmachari. That's a good way for me to think. But as a grihastha, forget it. If you're going to look at your wife like a witch and your kids like jackals, and you're going to have a happy family life, you want it, Maharaj. Something interesting happened. I'm part of the preaching in China, and we were having a meeting. And one of the devotees was noting that like 85% of devotees joining are women. And of all those women joining, only 5% of their husbands join, right? So he said, we are actually, by our preaching, if we don't incorporate the entire family, work with those men and kids who are not devotees, at least work with the women who become devotees to be good mothers still and integrate, we are simply going to be breaking up. Our preaching is going to result in breaking up families, which is true. This is what we're doing, because when the women become devotees, they neglect their husbands and then they start neglecting their kids because they think it's Maya. So I think we all can understand, well, that's not what Prabhupada wants us to do. Like Prabhupada wasn't thinking, oh, I'll go to America and I'll break up families. That's ISKCON. That's my mission. Put that as the 8th purpose of ISKCON, to break up families. But so we have to look at our understanding of Shastra and say, wait a minute, does this align with Prabhupada's vision of what he wants me to be as a devotee, how he wants me to deal with people, how he wants to see? Because I always think like that. Whenever I'm reading and studying, applying Prabhupada's books, I'm always thinking, how does Prabhupada want me to be as a human being and as a devotee? And I think if we ask that question, it'll become obvious. Doesn't want us to break up families. He doesn't want me to tell my wife she's a witch and tell my kids they're jackals. Don't bother me, don't waste my time. And go up to people and go, Excuse me, sir, I just want to let you know, you're just a nasty, dirty, meat-eating karmi. It says it right here in our books. Just wanted to tell you. Prabhupada never did that. Those are philosophical statements. And then we turn those philosophical statements into ways of being and acting with people. Well, they're two different things. So I don't know if Maharaj, did he disappear?
Again, Maharaj, do you want to comment or continue in this vein?
Yeah, comment on that. What do you think?
This is
If you're
Maharaj is here. He's unmuted, but I don't see him, his video.
Yeah,
Bhaktivedanta Maharaj, are you with us?
Maybe he's gonna come back.
Would it be Mahatma Prabhu on the same topic, on the same vein? Would it be fair to say, to summarize what you've just said by remembering the famous statement in Mahabharata that to understand the absolute truth or truth in general, one should look in the hearts of self-realized persons, because the verse says that statements of the Shastra are, without all their black and white statements, they can only be understood and applied practically if applied under the guidance of self-realized persons. And that we have seen devotees who try to have direct access to Shastra and apply their understanding of what it means, and that creates havoc most of the time.
You know, it's such a good point. And one of the problems we face is you could read a verse and the verse seems so clear. This is what it means. But the result of that understanding of what it means is it could be detrimental to you or to other people if you act it out. So that verse you're quoting, the Nihitam Guhaya, Dharmasya Tattvam Nihitam Guhaya, the truth of Dharma is hidden within the heart of a devotee, was really exactly what I was saying. Knowing what Prabhupada wants me to be as a devotee, as a gentleman, as an example, as a kind, caring person, I can't read a verse and think, oh, I don't have to be that way. But look at what this verse says. That's a mistake, right? And so there are verses like that that are bewildering. That Harava Bhakta Sho Kuto Mahagunan, if you don't have bhakti, you have no good qualities. That's also a bewildering verse. And if you study it more broadly, Prabhupada actually said, yes, they do have good qualities. So many zeros. There's no Krishna in front of them. So he actually didn't deny that they had good qualities. They're not good qualities because they're not used for Krishna. So, you know, it broadens the understanding a little bit. And if you read a verse and it makes you develop demoniac qualities, probably you misunderstood the verse. You know, I think that's a good parameter. You know, if I read this verse and after I read this verse, now I hate everyone in the world. And now I'm nasty to everybody. I think you misunderstood the verse. So I think we have to look at it that way, you know, be careful.
Thank you very much, Mahatma Prabhu. We still have Bhaktivedanta Maharaj is back, and I wonder if Maharaj has anything else to say on the topic or ask another question, because Maharaj's questions are so profound. And
unfortunately, I was missing a part of your answer to my question because of the internet problems. So the very interesting explanation which I heard from Ravindra Swarup Prabhu in this regard, I wanted to share it with you. He said that we have to understand the audience for whom this Shastra was written. This is the audience of highly, as you rightly said, the audience of highly cultured people who are very attached to their families and to their kids and to their, society and this and that. And therefore, Shastra goes to a great extent or, to kind of help them to break attachments. whereas when people who don't have any human attachments, like, hippie-like people, so he said that the Shastra was written for very normal and very integrated people who are very balanced by nature, and to help them to go to another level, the Shastra goes into extreme by explaining all these things.
Yes.
But when we, people from a completely different background who are not, humanly attached and humanly balanced, when we hear all these things, we become elated, and we become even less human than we already are. Instead of bringing us to the superhuman level, it helps us to degrade, which is not the expected effect of the Shastra. The Shastra wants to elevate somebody who is already balanced, already humanly attached to another level. So we have to really, and therefore he said, first, these statements of the Shastras are definitely very important, and they're absolute, but for a certain audience. So first you have to become human. We are being subhuman. We have to become human, and then from human, by the help of Shastra, we can become superhuman. But Shastra is not for subhumans. Shastra is for humans. So
I've been seeing this problem. I've been thinking about this very problem lately, because, Facebook is full of misunderstandings. Misunderstanding is kind of normal, just misunderstanding an event, misunderstanding what somebody said, misunderstanding intention, and then, of course, misunderstanding Shastra. And it's a real problem, definitely a real problem, and we need mature devotees explaining Shastra to prevent that. And also, I had this discussion with Garuda Prabhu about some of Prabhupada's statements, which are very heavy, controversial. And he said it's a tradition in Buddhism, as well as Hinduism, to make these heavy statements, just to shake people up. Okay, that woke me up, that statement you just made. But when you take it literally, then it becomes problematic. But it's like, I've had sannyasis when I was young say things that totally shook me up, and it detached me. It really helped me. And if they said it lightly, it wouldn't have helped. And so sometimes we need that. But if you take it the wrong way, it can, like you say,
it has to be understood that this is the compassion. This is how Prabhupada and people who follow him manifest their compassion. It's their compassionate nature which manifests in a very heavy way sometimes, and it's necessary, because otherwise, people will not be shaken up. You're right.
And also I think if we have a problem, we tend to want, if we want to, let's say, endeavor to be more Krishna conscious, more strict, more austere, and we don't know how to balance that properly, then we get upset with all the other devotees who aren't as strict and austere as we are. And we become, why aren't you doing this? Why? We become harsh. So a lot of that is our own internal struggle ourselves. We're struggling to follow it. We want other people to follow it. And we get upset when they don't follow it, because we need them to follow it, because we're so weak, we can't follow it without them. And so the internal culture creates this dysfunctional culture outside.
It's interesting that I also read in one of spiritual books of Christian tradition, they say that the first sign of you deviating from humility is that you start looking what others are doing instead of looking what you're doing. That's the first sign that you're breaking the principle of humility. You're more concerned with what others are doing rather than being concerned with what you are doing. And, you know.
Exactly. Yeah. Because then you don't have to do anything. All you have to do is point out others' faults. And
that's what retweaks usually do.
and you know, that's a liability of being a leader, because sometimes when you become a leader, you kind of feel that now I'm a leader, so I'm entitled to correct people. And sometimes we think as a leader, well, now as a leader, whatever decision I make, it must be right. And you get yourself into all kinds of trouble, and you disrupt so many devotees when you think that way. So
Mahatma Prabhu and Bhaktivedanta Maharaj, our time is running out, and I'd just like to ask you both to say a few concluding words to wrap up and summarize this discussion and bring the point home. Thank you so much for, unless you want to go over time, of course, which you're perfectly entitled to do.
I was kind of thinking, I didn't take the discussion maybe to the place that everyone was expecting it would go. Like, maybe I did, maybe I didn't, I don't know. Because I was thinking of, you know, like integrating in your life, in your family. But let me say one thing we didn't say, just because I think it's important. There's this principle called private victory precedes public victory. And so master it at home, and then you can master it outside. And I think a lot of us, a lot of people master it outside and fail at home. They have private failure and they try to have public victory. And it doesn't work. So we had class yesterday, and I said in class yesterday, I said, sadhana begins at 9 a.m. And what did I mean by that? I said at 9 a.m., you're starting to deal with people. And so everything you learned, now you have to practice that in your interactions. And so it's easy to hear, it's easy to understand intellectually, but the real practice is our interaction and working in the world, while we're working, exhibiting qualities of a Vaishnava with everyone, no matter how they deal with us. And always feeling ourselves humble, not these dirty meat-eating karmis, but I'm just trying to be a devotee. That's the feeling. And I want to tell you one story. It's this amazing story. I don't know if you heard it. It was Prabhupada exhibiting this highest humility that only we can imitate, that only comes from prema. But it shows how he was feeling. Maybe it was 1969 or something. He asked the devotees to open 108 temples. He said, I want you to open 108 before I die. And then he said, then I can die peacefully, knowing that I fulfilled the desire of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, and then I can go to hell. Those are his exact words, then I can go to hell, or then I will go to hell. And the devotee said, Prabhupada, you know, like, you're not going to go to hell. Yes, I am. Prabhupada, but if you go to hell, we want to go with you. And he said, no, you're going to Vaikuntha, I'm going to hell. Like, what's that? What's that mentality? You know, actually feeling my disciples are Krishna conscious and I'm not. So if we could get a little drop of that, that would make a huge difference in our life and in our movement in general. And I think it would answer this whole question of how to interact with people in general. We would know if we had that mentality. Maharaj, the last words, the icing on the cake is going to come from you.
No, I don't have much to say. I just want to thank you for bringing up this topic, which is very relevant, and for making us look inside and asking these questions, whether we are up to the mark. I think that all the devotees who were listening were profoundly moved by this approach. It's a very relevant discussion for all the leaders because, you know, it's indeed difficult to combine leadership, devotion, and human nature. Sometimes incompatible. The role of a leader, the role of a human being, and the role of a devotee.
Yes.
Basically, as far as I can understand, your message is that even though it's difficult, we should still try to live and to combine these three, not roles, but three features of our life: remain human beings, remain leaders, strong leaders, and remain devotees, and balance these three sides, and definitely be respectful to everyone, because this is the ideal of Trinadapi Sunichina Shloka, Amanina Manadina. Yes. So I just can only thank you on behalf of all devotees. Rukmini Priya Mataji, she wrote that I have an impression that this is not the end of the our talk, it's just the beginning, and she's asking if there could be some continuation of this sort of talk, soul-searching talk. But it's of course up to Mad Mohan and the administration whether it's possible to incorporate it into the program which we have. But I think this is the highest form of appreciation when she says, I want more. You know, after 2 hours lecture, when she says, I want more, it speaks a lot.
Hare Krishna. Well, I'm happy to help. If there's time, I'm happy to help. I have more exercises.
We would
and
love
many-
to have
many
Mahatma Prabhu
courses
again.
on this topic. I want to say, Rukmini, I want to say one thing. We did a course in Mayapur, and one aspect of the course was your relationship with yourself. And so we were doing many exercises and discussions about this. And so many devotees said, you know, we always talk about relation with Krishna, relation with Guru, relation with other devotees, but we never talk about relationship with ourselves. And it's, you know, it's one of the relationships we need to talk about, because we lie to ourselves, we delude ourselves, we misguide ourselves, do lots of things, and we need to be more aware of it. So maybe we can do something more.
Thank you very much, Mahatma Prabhu. We definitely love to have you more often on our virtual online classes, and we look forward to having more of your association. Thank you very much, if you don't mind.
No.
Thank you.
Hari Bolo. You're welcome. Jai
Thank you very
Prabhupada.
much. Thank you, Bhaktivedanta Maharaj, as well, for joining us. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.